5,300 years ago, a man froze to death in the Italian Alps. When scientists found his body in 1991, they expected to learn what he ate, what he carried, how he died. What they did not expect was to find out that he knew something about human nature that most people still don't understand today. Because frozen into his skin, under layers of ice and time, were 61 tattoos. Simple lines, small crosses, nothing that would impress your local tattoo artist. But here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Some of them were on his lower back and behind his knees, places he absolutely could not have reached himself. Which means thousands of years before the pyramids, before written language, before anyone had ever heard of Instagram, a human being sat down, let another human being hurt them on purpose, and asked them to make a mark that would never go away. And we've been doing it ever since. So the real question isn't, when did we start? It's, why haven't we stopped? Think about what a tattoo actually is for a second. Not the design, not the meaning you tell people about at parties, the physical reality. You are asking another person to drag a needle through your skin, your largest organ, the thing keeping your insides from becoming outsides, thousands of times, depositing ink into the dermis where your immune system will spend the rest of your life trying and failing to remove it. It hurts, it costs money, it's permanent in a way that almost nothing else in your life is. And yet roughly 40% of millennials have at least one. Your barista has one, your accountant probably has one, the person who delivered your last package might be covered in them. We have built an entire global industry worth billions of dollars around the concept of please hurt me and make it permanent. And the wildest part? We were doing this before we figured out how to write things down, before pottery, before we domesticated the horse, before anyone thought to build a wall around a city. Someone thought to build a wall around an idea, using their own skin as the bricks. Here's the thing nobody talks about enough. When archaeologists find ancient tools, or pottery, or cave paintings, they understand what those things are for. The tool breaks a nut. The pot holds grain. The painting, well, the painting is a little mysterious, but at least it's on a wall where everyone can see it. But a tattoo is different. A tattoo is a message that dies with the messenger. Unless, of course, the messenger freezes to death in a glacier and waits 5,000 years for us to catch up, which is exactly what happened with Ötzi the Iceman. And when researchers actually mapped those 61 marks, they noticed something that completely changed the story. The tattoos weren't random decoration. They clustered around areas of joint degeneration and spinal wear. This man had arthritis, badly, and the tattoos were placed directly over the places that hurt. Let that sit for a moment. The oldest evidence we have of humans tattooing each other might not be art, it might be medicine, or ritual, or some combination of the two that we don't have a word for anymore. He wasn't trying to look cool for the other cavemen, he was trying to fix something, and someone else, the person holding the tool, was trying to help him. So, how do you tattoo someone when the concept of a tattoo machine is 40 centuries away? The short answer is, very slowly, with an amount of pain that would make most modern humans faint. Archaeologists and anthropologists have studied traditional tattooing methods that survived into the modern era, in Polynesia, in the Arctic, in parts of Southeast Asia. And the process is remarkably consistent across thousands of miles and thousands of years. You take a sharp object, a bone needle, a thorn, a sharpened piece of obsidian. You dip it in pigment, soot, charcoal, ochre, plant resin, and then you tap it into the skin, one puncture at a time, by hand, for hours. No anesthetic, No electric buzz, just the rhythmic sound of bone hitting bone or wood hitting wood, and the slow, deliberate embedding of something permanent into something alive. In some traditions, the tattoo artist was a spiritual figure, in others, a family member. In almost all cases, the person receiving the tattoo was expected to endure the pain without showing weakness, because the pain wasn't a side effect, it was the point. We'll get to why in about 3 minutes, but first we need to talk about how widespread this actually was, because Ötzi isn't an isolated weirdo. He's the beginning of a pattern that shows up everywhere humans went.
In ancient Egypt, researchers have found tattooed mummies dating back to around 2000 BCE. And here's where the story gets genuinely interesting. The oldest tattooed Egyptian remains we have belong to women, specifically women associated with religious ritual. Their tattoos weren't hidden. They were placed on highly visible areas, the abdomen, the thighs, the arms, and they depicted protective symbols, patterns associated with the goddess Hathor, and what appeared to be therapeutic markers related to pregnancy and childbirth. These weren't casual decorations. These were functional, spiritual, and deeply intentional, and they were on women at a time when most of the historical record was written by men who didn't think women's daily lives were worth documenting. The tattoos outlasted the historians. Fast forward a few thousand years and a few thousand miles, and you find the same behavior in Siberia. The Pazyryk burials, dating to around 500 BCE, contained bodies with elaborate animal tattoos, griffins, deer, mountain goats, so detailed and so sophisticated that they look like they could have been done last week. These were nomadic warriors and chiefs. Their tattoos said something about status, about achievements, about the animals they identified with. But again, the message died with them. We can guess at the meaning, but we can't know. And that ambiguity is actually the most important part of this story. Because a tattoo isn't just communication, it's commitment. You can't take it off when the trend changes. You can't leave it at home. You're literally carrying the message through the world, through every season of your life, until you die. And that permanence creates a kind of honesty that no other form of expression can match.
But here's the question that keeps me up at night. If tattoos are about identity, about belonging, about saying, "This is who I am," then why did so many different cultures invent them independently? The Egyptians didn't know about the Siberians. The Polynesians didn't know about Ötzi. The indigenous peoples of North and South America developed their own traditions without anyone sending them a memo. And yet they all arrived at the same conclusion. The human body is a canvas, and sometimes the canvas needs to say something back. Is this just a coincidence, or is tattooing something deeper, something wired into what it means to be human?
The tidy narrative here is that tattoos are about identity. You get a tattoo to show who you are, what group you belong to, what you've survived. Simple, clean, and mostly true. Except once you start looking closer, the whole thing starts to unravel. Because if tattoos were purely about communication, we'd expect them to be painless and temporary. If the goal is just to tell people you're in the warrior caste, you could wear a necklace, you could paint your face, you could carry a specific staff. All of those things work just as well, and none of them require you to let someone puncture your skin 1,000 times. So why the permanence? Why the pain? Why choose the one method of self-expression that is literally embedded in your flesh? Here's where it gets genuinely interesting. I think we've been asking the wrong question. It's not why did humans start tattooing themselves, it's why did humans need to transform themselves? Because a tattoo isn't just a message to other people, it's a message to yourself. It's a boundary marker between who you were before the needle and who you are after it. The anthropologist Alfred Gell wrote about this in the context of Polynesian tattooing, where the process of receiving a tattoo was often a rite of passage, a literal transformation from one state of being to another. The pain wasn't a bug, it was the feature that made the transformation real. You couldn't buy your way into adulthood, you couldn't fake it, you had to endure it. And the mark on your skin was proof that you had changed. This is why tattoos show up so consistently at moments of transition. Puberty, marriage, mourning, warfare, religious conversion. The human mind seems to understand at a very deep level that some changes need to be permanent, that words aren't enough, that the body itself needs to participate in the story.
And that brings us to the strangest idea in this entire video. What if tattooing isn't a cultural invention at all? What if it's an inevitable behavior, something that any intelligent, social, self-aware species would eventually discover? Think about it. We know that humans are obsessed with marking boundaries. We draw lines on maps that don't exist in nature. We build fences. We wear specific clothes to signal specific things. We name ourselves. We create identities out of thin air and then defend them with our lives. The tattoo is just the most literal version of this impulse. It's a line drawn on the one thing you can never fully separate from, your own body. And once you notice that, you start seeing it everywhere. Scarification in Africa, cranial deformation in the Maya world, foot binding in China, neck rings in Myanmar. Every culture finds some way to say, this body is not just biology, it is a project, it is a statement, it is mine to shape.
But there's a contradiction at the heart of all this, and it's one of the most human contradictions there is. We tattoo ourselves to belong, and we tattoo ourselves to stand apart. The same mark that says, I am one of you, also says, I am different from everyone who doesn't have this. The Polynesian chief with full facial tattooing was announcing his rank, his genealogy, his specific place in a specific society, but he was also creating a visual separation between himself and the unmarked. The modern person with a sleeve of personal symbols is doing the exact same thing. They are saying, I belong to a tribe of people who believe that skin is a place for stories, and simultaneously, my story is not your story. This tension between belonging and individuality is ancient, and tattoos sit right in the middle of it. They are the physical evidence of a psychological need that we don't fully understand and probably never will. The need to be seen. The need to be permanent, the need to mean something.
And here's something that doesn't get talked about enough in the ancient tattoo conversation. The skin is not just a surface, it's a boundary. It's the edge of you. Every other form of decoration, clothing, jewelry, paint, sits on top of that boundary, but a tattoo crosses it. It moves the decoration from the outside to the inside, from the temporary to the permanent, from the chosen to the irreversible. That is not a small cognitive leap. That is a species deciding that the self is not a fixed thing, but a work in progress. That identity is not just something you have, but something you make, and that making might hurt, and that the hurt might be worth it. You are doing this right now. Maybe you have a tattoo, maybe you don't, but look at the choices you made this morning. The specific shirt you put on, the way you did your hair, the phone case you chose, the background on your lock screen. These are all low-stakes, temporary versions of the exact same impulse that drove Ötzi to let someone puncture his spine with a bone needle. You are constructing an identity. You're broadcasting something about who you are, what you survived, what you value, what group you belong to. The only difference is that your choices wash off, his didn't. And maybe that's why tattoos have exploded in the modern world. Because in a society where everything is temporary, your job, your relationship status, your aesthetic, your opinions,
There is something almost rebellious about permanence. A tattoo says, I am willing to be wrong forever. I am willing to carry this version of myself into every future I can't yet imagine. And that is either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Possibly both. Probably both. The ancient Egyptians didn't have TikTok. Ötzi didn't have a Pinterest board of sleeve ideas. The Pazyryk warriors weren't trying to impress anyone on a beach. They were doing something much older and much stranger. They were using their own bodies to answer a question that has no final answer. The question isn't, what do I look like? The question is, who am I and how do I make that real? And 5,000 years from now, when archaeologists dig up our remains, they won't find our phones. They won't find our social media profiles. They won't find the carefully curated versions of ourselves that we spent hours constructing online. But they might find our tattoos. And those marks will be the only things that tell the truth about who we actually were.
So here's what I want to know. If you had to get one tattoo today, something permanent, something that would outlast every version of yourself you haven't become yet, what would it be? Not the design, the meaning. What is the one thing about you right now that you would be willing to carry into every future you can't see yet? Let me know in the comments. Until then, I'll see you in the next one.